The following program is made possible in part by the Dayton Bar Association.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's edition of You and the Law, which is a public service program proudly sponsored by the Dayton Bar Association. I'm Montgomery County Common Pleas Court Judge Steve Dankof, your host for tonight's program. Our regular host is Dayton lawyer Mike Monta, that many of you know. Mike is home convalescing following knee replacement, and we send along our best wishes to Mike. Joining me on the program this evening are my colleagues, Montgomery County Common Pleas Court Judges Michael Tucker and Gregory F.Singer. Tonight on the program we're going to discuss some of the developments that we think are frankly positive steps at the court, including new programs that are spearheaded in large part by Judges Tucker and Singer. Before we launch into tonight's topics, I want to give our folks, our listeners, a brief reminder that You and the Law is a monthly presentation that is sponsored by the Dayton Bar Association and produced at the studios of Dayton Access Television. The program is available on Time Warner Cable Channel 5, and which is Time Warner's public access channel, as well as Continental Cablevision Channel 6, and that's through the services of the Miami Valley Cable Council. The program is also live streamed on the station's website, which is datv.org. The executive producer for today's program is Judge Michael Brigner, a friend of all of ours. And as always, ours is a live call-in show, and we actually beg for your calls into the station tonight. And the number here is area code 937-223-5311. First, let me ask Judge Tucker, who's our administrative judge, to tell our viewers something of his professional background.
Thank you, Steve. In many ways, there's not much to tell. I'm a lifetime Daytonian. I graduated from the University of Dayton School of Law in 1980, and thereafter, for the next 20 years, practiced law in Dayton and Montgomery County and surrounding counties. It is perhaps notable that in the last 10 years of that 20-year stint, Judge Singer was one of my partners, and we had a nice practice together before each of us ended up on the court. In November of 2000, I was elected to the Common Pleas bench and have served there ever since. I am now into my third 6-year term. At the beginning of this year, 2013, I became the court's administrative judge. What that essentially means is that I am more involved in the day-to-day operations of the court regarding issues anywhere from personnel decisions, court policies, and the like. And of course, I work very closely with our court administrator, who is Jim Dare. And typically, the administrative judge is a rotating system, and typically a judge serves 3 years as the administrative judge, and I am finishing up the first of what is probably going to be a 3-year term as the administrative judge. That, in a nutshell, is my background, such as it is.
Okay, thanks a lot. Greg, we introduced you briefly previously. This is Greg Singer, and if you'd tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about your professional background.
Well, thank you. I, like Mike, have been practicing in the Dayton area my entire career. General practice in the last 10 years of which we would be remiss to omit. One of our partners was Judge Mike Hall, who's now on the Court of Appeals, and as such grades our papers. So yeah, we don't want to fail to mention him. Also went to the University of Dayton School of Law and was appointed to the bench by Governor Taft in 2005 and re-elected thereafter. I'm pleased to serve the court in various capacities, including the executive committee with Judge Tucker here, also the Personnel Committee, and I chair the Court's Criminal Practice Committee. I'm active with the Ohio Common Pleas Judges Association, and that's the extent of my career, such as mine is.
I'll briefly, I've been on the program fairly recently a couple of times, but I'll tell the folks out there with respect to my so-called career, I think that's what we're talking about. After I graduated from the University of Texas School of Law, I returned home and took up practice with the then Dayton firm of Smith & Schnocky, and worked closely with men like Lloyd O'Hara and Jim Gilvary, Walter Porter, the latter two who were also judges on our court, and felt very fortunate about that. And then in 1989, after 13 years with S&S, I went into essentially what was a solo practice for the balance of my career until I was appointed to the court by Governor Strickland and then reelected as well. In a nutshell, that's what I have done, and now as Judge Tucker and Judge Singer, am frankly thrilled to be on the court. I can't think of anything I'd rather be doing than what I do now for the citizens of Montgomery County. One of the things that, and really what we want to talk about generally tonight, fellows, is there have been a number of developments fairly recently in the court in terms of maybe some new direction that we're taking in a couple of areas. And one of the ones I wanted to throw out to Judge Tucker, our administrative judge, is to talk to our listeners and our viewers a little bit about the revamping of the civil mediation program. Kind of tell them briefly what it is and how it's changing, and really in essence how that change kind of came about, so that our viewers will get an idea of how the court works and its responsiveness to the public.
Thank you, Steve. First of all, it might be helpful to at least certain members of the audience to understand what mediation is. Mediation is a mechanism whereby parties to a civil cause of action can work towards resolving the dispute without the expense and uncertainty of a trial. And mediation is a mechanism whereby an individual called a mediator helps the parties to potentially resolve the dispute. Mediation is something that over the past 15 or 20 years has become an integral part of resolving civil disputes. And when I talk about a civil dispute, it can run the gamut from a personal injury cause of action, an automobile collision, it can be a medical malpractice case, it can be a commercial dispute, a contract dispute. It really runs the gamut. But obviously, trials are very expensive, trials are uncertain, and mediation is often helpful to bring parties together to resolve the case before, again, incurring the expense and uncertainty of a trial. And what a mediator does, the mediator is an attorney who has received training in allowing parties to look at the case in a different perspective from perhaps how they had looked at it before. And using that training, a mediator will hopefully get the parties together to compromise and to resolve, that is, to settle the case. Now, in large, complex cases, the parties, through their attorneys, often hire a private mediator to help them try to resolve the case. However, because of the expense involved, in smaller, less complex cases, hiring a mediator is not something that is appropriate or cost-effective. So many counties, including Montgomery County, have developed a mediation program whereby we have local attorneys to act as mediators in the hope of, in these smaller, less complex cases, bringing the parties together, again, without the need for a trial, without the expense and uncertainty of a trial. A few months ago, and you have to understand, the judges, we refer the cases to mediation, and we either hear back that the case has been resolved or not resolved at mediation, but we're not actively involved in the mediation process itself. And a few months ago, several attorneys came to me and said, basically, the program is not working well. We really hesitate to ask that a case be referred to mediation because of problems that we see in the program. And obviously, as the administrative judge, I had to take that seriously, because if attorneys are telling me that a particular program that is designed to help the parties and the attorneys to resolve cases is not working well, it's incumbent upon us to look into that claim and to see if in fact there is a problem, and to help resolve the problem, to fix the problem, if you will, if there is one. And we looked into it, and quite frankly, I determined that there is a problem and that it needs to be fixed. And I asked one of our colleagues, Judge Mike Krumholtz, who is our newest member of the bench, but who has a vast array of experience in civil litigation, to look into it. And Mike, as we speak, is spearheading a group of attorneys and judges to come up with solutions to the problems that we see in the program. And I hope over the next few months that those fixes will be in place, and we'll have a mediation system that works better and is more responsive to the attorneys and the parties, so that we have a first-class mediation system that will help resolve these less complex cases that still are very important to the parties and need to be resolved in the most efficient, timely fashion possible.
I think one of the things that you hit on, Mike, that's to me is really important is the kind of the morality tale here to those that are listening, particularly the lawyers and I'll call the consumers, if you will, of our court. Is the fact of the matter is that the court, I believe, more than ever, is responsive to the constructive criticism and from the lawyers that practiced before us. And would you agree that that's really one of the lessons to take out of this, is that here we are, we received some input from frankly some very capable lawyers that said, hey, there's this problem or that problem or perhaps a host of problems, and we're moving to address those problems.
Steve, you're exactly right. And in anticipation of that question, I did jot down a few thoughts on exactly that issue. The court's job, fundamentally, is through the judges and the court staff, is to resolve the disputes, whether those disputes are civil or criminal in nature, that come before us. And it's our job to do so in a fair, efficient, and timely way. And fundamentally, that's the job that the court must do. And the lawyers representing their clients, they have keen insight into practices which enhance and also which detract from that goal of resolving cases in a timely, efficient, and fair manner. And it behooves us to listen to the attorneys when they come to us with a concern, with a problem. We must, in my mind, look into whether or not there is validity to what is being said, and to be responsive to the concern that is being expressed. That doesn't mean that every time there is necessarily a solution to the concern being expressed, but we must at least look into the problem, and if we find that there is a problem that is there that we can work to fix, it's incumbent upon us as stewards of our court to take whatever action we can take to resolve the issue.
Okay. I want to take a brief moment, because it's important to keep in mind, as we noted earlier, that our program is brought to you by the Dayton Bar Association, which provides a variety of community services for the benefit of Miami Valley citizens. These include a number of things: the Notary Public Service, that includes applications and testing. The Dayton Bar Association has a program known as Wills for Heroes, whereby volunteer Dayton Bar members, lawyers, create wills for emergency first responders, such as police, firefighters, and EMTs. The Dayton Bar has a public service committee that promotes a number of community service projects throughout the region. The Dayton Bar's website, www.daybar, that's DAYBAR.org, provides reference information, a guide to services and legal links to the various Miami Valley area courts, including, I believe, our court. The Dayton Bar also offers the Volunteer Lawyers Project, which serves disadvantaged members of the community. This organization was founded and is supported by Dayton Bar Association members. And then finally, the Dayton Bar provides the Lawyer Referral Service, which is a nonprofit service of the Dayton Bar, which refers callers to lawyers in a variety of practice areas. And importantly, initially, the half-hour consultation will cost no more than $25, and thereby providing callers to the Dayton Bar an economical way to determine their rights and their options in various legal matters. I want to turn our attention then to another topic that is, if we might say, the winds of change a little bit at the court. And I'm going to lob this in the direction of Judge Steve, primarily because of his, in his capacity as the chairman of our Criminal Practice Committee, and that is the changes that are underway to the court's criminal appointed counsel program for indigent defendants, and ask Judge Steve, what's that all about, and how did that come about? If you could share that with our viewers.
Once again, that was in response to suggestions or complaints made by some of the members of our local bar association. The issue had become with our appointed counsel list is a matter which we ought to explain. There are matters which our public defender is, for one reason or another, not able to handle, and we need to have a list of lawyers to, in this 50th year of Gideon versus Wainwright, where right to counsel was guaranteed to our citizens, we need to have a list of folks that we can appoint to handle criminal matters of, well, frankly, everything from jailable misdemeanors up to murder cases. And in that regard, we need to make sure that our very capable bar association is up to speed with that. And there's a difference between those who do criminal defense work all day, every day, and those who have an occasional appointment or a criminal case where they come in to represent. And in that regard, to ensure the highest quality of defense representation, which we believe on our bench is paramount to our mission, it's incumbent on us to ensure that they have the proper background training experience. And in that regard, we have undertaken to provide a scheme in which those who want to be on the appointed criminal defense list must complete a mentoring program in which they participate in a criminal jury trial with a more experienced lawyer, as well as a number of other perfunctory qualifications which ensure to us that their clients are receiving the highest quality representation possible. And fortunately, our appointed counsel are not well paid, but they are nonetheless vigorous. And just as a side note to an early reference to your comments about the Volunteer Lawyer Project run by the Bar Association, we have a number of quality lawyers who volunteer a lot of time, and including, which something I'm especially proud of, the Wills for Heroes program, in which, in connection with LexisNexis, the Bar Association provides services to our folks in the armed services, and we're all very proud of that, I think. But aside from that, we have a bar association that is willing and able to provide criminal defense services, and again, we're looking for the highest quality program we can get, and I think that we've undertaken some steps to fine-tune an otherwise very workable system.
I think one of the things that I think I can speak for all three of us. I'm sure I do. We have here, we're very blessed to have the Montgomery County Public Defender program. It's headed up by the Montgomery County Public Defender, Rudy Weiner, longtime Dayton attorney, extremely able, frankly much beloved, and I think we would all agree that the level of criminal representation that indigent defendants receive from the Public Defender's Office is exceptional, frankly. And if it weren't for the Public Defender handling the amount of cases that they handle, frankly, I don't know what we would do. I think we would be at a loss to push the cases through in, as Judge Tucker's already pointed out, in an efficient, timely, and most importantly, fair manner. But as Judge Singer's pointed out, there's only so much that they can humanly do, number one. Number two, naturally, there are times, certainly, when they're going to have a conflict. For example, if there's co-defendants, they can't represent them both. So there is a great need, obviously, for the private bar, if you will, to pick up the slack. And that's where our appointed counsel program comes in. And the sorts of changes that Judge Singer was talking about become instrumental to making sure that at all times the court is looking after, as it must, the rights of the accused and their rights to a fair trial that are guaranteed under the Constitution. And it's no accident that the judges here in Montgomery County take that responsibility extremely seriously, and hence we're in the process of looking at that, revamping the program, tweaking it, as Judge Singer indicates. And I think, again, kind of a morality tale is the tweaking is, I think as Judge Singer's already highlighted, is the result of lawyers who cared enough about the system and about what we do as judges and lawyers to come forward and say that they felt that there are areas that we could do better, should do better, and then under Judge Tucker's leadership, I think the judges, no question, unanimously felt, yeah, we can do better, we must do better, and hence we're in the process of revamping that program for the good.
And if I could, Steve, I
Sure.
think we would be remiss if we didn't mention that another of our colleagues, Judge Dennis Atkins, has really spearheaded the effort of revamping, tweaking our appointed criminal list. He's been instrumental in that, and he came to me and said, if you want to do it, I will do it. And he has done a tremendous job, and the effort that he has put in has been tremendous.
And it has, and I didn't want to mention it because, frankly, I didn't want him to get too big ahead because I'm about to give him a shout out on another program
right,
that he's working on. But no, Dennis is, Judge Atkins is not only at once a terrific guy, but has a vast amount of experience, as we all know, in the criminal justice system. He was, for many years, a prosecutor, both, I think, in Oakwood and Beaver Creek, as far as I know, perhaps elsewhere. Before that, he was a police officer. And then in addition to being a prosecutor, also was a very noted criminal defense lawyer who defended a number of death penalty cases, which frankly not too many lawyers can say. So Denny was very generous to offer his time to the project, and at the risk of overinflating his ego, he deserves a shout out. Speaking of Judge Atkins, he also took on the task that Judge Tucker gave to him to develop what's sort of what I'll call the newest arrow in the quiver of the Common Pleas Court, which is the Veterans Treatment Court. And let me just say, for purposes of sort of laying a little groundwork about what I talk about when I say an arrow in the quiver. One of the things that our viewers and our listeners ought to understand and think about is that there's one view that some people hold, that we should just keep building prisons, and when people offend, just send them to prison, be done with it, give them the maximum sentence that the legislature allows, and off they go, and we'll worry about them again when they've served their sentence. The problem with that viewpoint is it's rather counterproductive, because folks are coming home. They're going to get out of prison someday. They're going to come back. Where are they going to come back? They're going to come home. And so the idea being that if we're going to sentence people to prison, we want to do so in both the overarching concern to protect the public when we send somebody to prison, but also understanding that while in prison there are programs for them. We also have programs for them before they get to prison. And for example, in most metropolitan common police courts like ours, they have a number of what I'll call specialty courts. For the viewers, we have in Montgomery County, have had for a long time, a drug court. Well, what's the purpose of that? That's a court headed up by Judge O'Connell for people who have a serious problem with drug addiction, drug abuse. Perhaps they've had difficulty with recidivism. They're assigned to that court so that they can be supervised by probation officers who specialize in the supervision of people with drug addiction and related afflictions. And then Judge O'Connell, who is the drug court judge, has a docket to which people are assigned so that he can monitor their supervision more closely in an effort to be more successful. We also have a felony non-support court, which, as people would think, well, that relates to folks that aren't paying their support. You would be right, chronically so. And I headed up that program most recently for about the last 2.5 years, and now Judge Krumholtz, to whom Judge Tucker previously alluded, has graciously taken that responsibility over. And he now heads it up, and that, again, a specialty court with specific probation officers assigned to that docket who have a stable of clientele, probationers, whatever, that they manage, that they supervise, all with an eye toward making those people more productive members of our community, to assist them in getting jobs, which we have a lot of success with through the Goodwill Easter Seals job program. And so the latest effort in that regard is the newly created, minted, if you will, Veterans Treatment Court. And I wondered if Judge Tucker wanted to talk a little bit about that. I'm happy to do so as well, but I thought you might talk about the genesis of how that program came to be.
Well, actually, the genesis of the program, and again, not to give Denny too big of a head, too big of a
it's way too late now.
Yeah, that's probably so. He came to me and he said, Mike, I think our court needs a veterans court, and he did this very early in 2013. And I said, well, I really had not thought about it. I didn't know if we even had enough folks who were veterans who were on probation to make it a worthwhile effort. But I said, why don't you look at it? And Denny, along with our court administrator, Jim Dare, started looking at whether or not this would be a worthwhile endeavor. They came back to me and said, we believe that there are enough veterans who are on probation to make this a worthwhile effort. And the reason that veterans are different are myriad, but I think one of the things that was found out by Judge Atkins and Jim Dare is that especially our newer veterans from the Iraq War and also Afghanistan, are coming back with problems, post-traumatic stress syndrome. Some of them have drug problems, and they're having a difficult time readjusting to civilian life. And sometimes that leads to criminal activity. And they have these special needs, again, the post-traumatic stress, which is something that is very difficult for us to manage in a typical probationary setting. They have other issues that are difficult to manage in that fashion. So with this specialty court, with this veterans court, we are able to give specific guidance to veterans who are on probation, and it's in cooperation with the Veterans Administration System and also the local Veterans Commission as well. Both of those groups have given us tremendous support, and with Judge Atkins heading the way, we are ready to launch this. And in December, less than a year after Judge Atkins came to me with the idea, we are going to launch this new court, and I think it will be a tremendous added value to our court, and in particular, of course, those folks who are veterans who find themselves in the criminal justice system. And obviously, it's not for every veteran, but it's going to be veterans who have committed low-level offenses, who are not going to be sent to prison given the nature of the offense, who would otherwise be on probation, and this is just additional support for those folks.
As I look at the brochure that's been created for the program, you've already hit on this, but I thought I would mention specifically, it talks about general treatment eligibility guidelines, and it talks about diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what you've just been talking about, other trauma, mental health, substance abuse, and related disorders. Talks about the veteran must have the mental and the emotional ability to understand the veteran's treatment court guidelines and to voluntarily participate in the program. The veterans must be deemed eligible by the Veterans Administration eligibility requirements, and the veteran must have a willingness to engage in the services provided. And just anecdotally, I had a case involving a veteran who served in the Gulf War on 2 separate occasions. He had committed a felony offense of violence. He had been sentenced to prison originally by my predecessor, and I think that prison sentence was appropriate. While in the institution, he participated in some programs and demonstrated that he was, as the vernacular might be, getting it, and was working hard at trying to reacclimate himself and to demonstrate that he was worthy of being given an opportunity for judicial release. With the input from Jim Dare, our then head of adult probation, now our court administrator, I took that chance on this individual, and when he got out on judicial release, he continued to have some problems, not in terms of being dangerous to the community, more in terms of being a threat to himself, in terms of abusing substances, especially alcohol. And the thought always occurs, much like Ernest Hemingway, that essentially what he was doing was self-medicating. The initial recommendation was for me to send him back to prison. I wasn't inclined to do that for a guy that had fought at the Battle of Fallujah and seen the worst of the worst. My inclination was to keep working with him, and with Jim Dare we did that. He made some progress, then he took a step or two backward. Again, the recommendation was send him back to prison. I still didn't feel good about that, and ultimately we paired him up with an inpatient program at the VA, and all of a sudden we're starting to make some real strides, and we're hoping that we may have saved a guy. So that's kind of what this whole thing is about, and I think one of the things that's important for the listeners and the viewers to understand that much of the funding for this program is obviously funding that's already there. It's through the federal government and the VA, and what we're doing is developing a program that dovetails with the expertise and the programs that they have, and yet we have the capacity and the capability of supervising these individuals from a probation standpoint, and the skill level and the skill set that our adult probation department has, which frankly we talked earlier about the public defenders. I think our adult probation department is second to none in terms of the skill set that they bring to assisting us in supervising probationers, and the Veterans Court is just another, if you will, step in that direction. I want to take a break a little bit here. Again, give another plug to our friends at the Dayton Bar Association, who have been proudly serving our community and our legal profession, I am told, since 1883, which is at or about the time that I think I might have graduated from law school. But the Dayton Bar obviously does an awful lot for our community, and we can't say that enough. And I want to remind, if we've got some folks out there that would like to call in and talk to Judge Tucker or Judge Singer, or heaven forbid me, you can call the station at 937-223-5311. I'm going to try to, if you will, kind of segue into a larger discussion now of what I'll call the court's vision for a more holistic approach to the supervision of probationers and former inmates who are being returned to the community, being released from the institution, and who return home to the Miami Valley. And I thought I might send this one over to Judge Singer, who has a particular interest and a passion really for the development of new programs, such as programs for women offenders. And again, by way of a segue, we had just talked about Veterans Court. One of the things we were talking about there is that we'll call it the buzzword in our profession is criminogenic factors, which is a $42 word that lawyers dream up, or psychologists or sociologists, but simply means, what are the stressors that various populations, if you will, of criminal offenders, what is it that makes them tick? What is it that leads them to offend? And it's not always the same. And the factors for men, for example, who abuse drugs is often different than the factors that lead women to do that. And so I thought I might ask Judge Singer to talk a little bit about that topic and what the court is doing and its vision for the future.
Well, thank you, Steve. Yeah, we're particularly with this drug situation we have, it turns out that between 1995 and 2005, we had pretty much of a crack cocaine epidemic. That blossomed into a heroin epidemic, which hopefully you've heard a little bit about here in the Miami Valley. And we talked to judges throughout the state and frankly in other parts of the country, and whether it be meth or heroin in our case, or other drugs of abuse, we have a burgeoning, if you will, problem. And frankly, our criminal justice system has not been fully equipped to handle that kind of growth. And we found this particularly in the case of women who, as they approach 50% of our drug abuse offenders, treatment facilities for our women are anywhere from 15 to 30% of most treatment facilities, such as they exist any longer. And of course, we in the Miami Valley have been particularly hurt by that, budget cuts and whatever have you, with 2 of our 3 county local treatment facilities having closed up, and so we're fighting for that kind of a solution as well. Commissioners Lieberman, Dodge, and Foley are very cognizant of that, and we're now more than ever, I think, working very closely with them. They are very concerned about the situation here in Montgomery County, the drug epidemic. Judge Plummer, I believe, just had a town hall meeting regarding it, and the jail is concerned, the sheriff. And did you know, our viewers, that our largest mental health treatment facility in Montgomery County is our Montgomery County Jail? We are not satisfied with that. We think that the Corps competence of the sheriff's office and the jail should not have to be caring for our mentally ill, and the folks at our Animus board are working very hard on that too, and their funding has been cut as well. So we're all working in a situation where we have 60% of our drug offenders have mental health issues or some co-occurring disorder. And it's not to say that if your child or loved one is suffering from a drug addiction that they have mental health problems, but these can be anxiety, depression, schizoaffective disorders, and runs the whole gamut. So we have challenges in fighting this epidemic from a number of points of problem: funding, ever-evolving knowledge about what causes this drug addiction, and we're working very hard in our court, and I know they are in the other local courts as well, in municipal courts and county courts, to figure out what is the best way that we can do to combat this. And in connection with that, whether it be Veterans Court, our currently existing drug court, which, as mentioned, Judge O'Connell very ably runs, we are looking, and just so the viewers know, the specialty court, what's that do for us? Well, it's a more active role by the court, by the judge, in the probation supervision of our offenders.
I think you're just fine. Go on.
We're good? Okay.
We're good.
And so what happens is, where was I?
Talking
Well,
about
you were
specialty
talking about
courts.
specialty courts.
Yeah, specialty courts. And so whether it be Veterans Court or the drug court or a couple of the other courts that we have in mind, we are looking at a more active involvement by the judge and accountability in that sense. So we are looking at a number of different exploring whether gender-specific courts might be appropriate, whether mental health courts might be appropriate, but we're looking at all of these to respond to what we're faced with now in 21st century Montgomery County, which is a apparently growing drug epidemic, and with new and more dangerous drugs coming on the market every time. I just saw something where the crocodile drug, which is a flesh-eating drug, yielding the addict to that a 2-year life expectancy at most, is now come to Central Ohio. The soonest we had, or the closest we had seen it before, it was Chicago, and now it's coming into Ohio. And so we've got to do whatever we can, and I think that there's a collaborative, many collaborative partners in the area that are paying attention to that, and so we want to assure you that we're doing whatever we can to, at the court, to address these problems as well.
I think one of the things that both Judge Tucker talked about earlier and Judge Singer just talked about was the use of the term collaboration or collaborative effort. And again, there's the reality of serving the public is that I'll say the days of wine and roses are over. The days of unlimited budgets for government services are a thing of the past. Everybody I know embraces that's in public service, understands the need to, as the vernacular goes, to be lean and mean and to do more with less, and we're all having to do that. We talked about collaboration. One of the programs that we talk about, the county commissioners are very interested in, particularly Commissioner Lieberman, but I know Commissioner Foley and Commissioner Dodge, as well as the reentry program, which is a program that is near and dear to Judge Rice in the federal court. And we are, I think, collaborating, hopefully in a productive way. Members of our court, myself, Judge Singer, Judge Krumholtz, have recently been assigned to that board by Judge Tucker, and with the idea being, again, of collaborating, of trying to do more with less and to try to do it in an effective way. One of the things that came home to me, frankly, through working so closely with Judge Singer, is as fate would have it, on the same Saturday, not too long ago, I had a young woman that I had placed on intervention in lieu of conviction for F5 heroin possession, and Greg had a young lady that he had placed, I think, on ILC for a similar offense. Greg's probationer committed suicide, and mine overdosed the same Saturday, and we both, we quite serendipitously talked to each other about it, and it was through those discussions that I had with Judge Singer that I began to realize that these criminogenic factors that we've talked about are in fact different for women than they are for men, or can be, and that we talked, for example, both of these young women who died, it turns out when you dug a little deeper, they both had some overarching mental health issues. Why? Well, it turns out that both of them had been sexually abused as early as 5 years of age by their fathers or a close male relative in the family, a factor absent in most situations involving men, for example. So there's a lot of these things that the judges are grappling with, trying to get a better personal understanding of how these things work, and that leads us to the quest for a more holistic approach to dealing with the situation involving all the various offenders that we come in contact with in the court here locally. As is our want here on the program, again, I want to give another shout out to our sponsor, which is the Dayton Bar Association, and all that they do for us, and including sponsoring this program and sponsoring a number of worthwhile public programs that we've already alluded to, including the Wills for Heroes, the Dayton Bar's Public Service Committee, the Volunteer Lawyer Project, and also the Lawyer Referral Service. And as I expected, we've just been overcome with phone calls this evening.
It's such a scintillating discussion, yes, about things that...
I've had the same effect on our viewers that I have on most people. I've put them to sleep. But in the event that anyone would like to talk to Judge Tucker or Judge Singer, call in at 223-5311 here at DATV.
And Steve, if I could, just for a moment, and I think this is something we discussed earlier today, but it's worth pointing out. These alternative approaches to prison are not only the right thing to do, but they are the pragmatic, fiscally responsible thing to do as well. I think most people have seen media coverage about the fact that Ohio prisons are beyond capacity, and it's a very expensive proposition to maintain individuals in prison. And if we on the front end can avoid that through the services that we as a court can provide, it is, again, much cheaper to supervise and to maintain defendants in the community as opposed to having that person go to prison. That doesn't mean that people shouldn't go to prison for certain offenses, or if their conduct is such that they simply cannot be appropriately controlled and monitored in the community, then prison is necessary. But we must look at alternatives to prison because, quite frankly, we simply can't afford to continue to send the number of people that we are sending to prison. That's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, we talked, I think, a little earlier at the outset, reflexively, I think the notion in some quarters is, well, let's just build more prisons. That's the solution to our problem. and it's simply, as you've just pointed out, cannot be. It's for lots of reasons, it's not the right approach, but not the least of which is couldn't do it if we wanted to because we don't have the money. Right. And I think the governor and the legislature has made that entirely clear to all of us. Gentlemen, we've got about another 5 or 6 minutes to go before the end of this evening's program, and we've talked about a number of things. I don't know if there's anything in particular that either of you, I'll suggest Judge Tucker if anything he'd like to talk about while we've got the floor here. We don't always get the opportunity to extol the virtues of our court.
Well, again, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back inappropriately, but our court is composed of 11 hardworking, dedicated individuals. We truly try to resolve cases, as I have said before, in a timely and fair manner, being as efficient as we possibly can be. And we work well together. Even though we are 11 individually elected individuals, we collaborate, we cooperate, and I think if you go around the state of Ohio, and this has been so for many years, if you ask folks around the state of Ohio, what is a court to look at as an example of a court that's well run, that's efficient, I think Montgomery County often comes to the forefront. And we have recently appointed a new court administrator, Jim Dare, who has decades of service with our court already, and we all look forward to working with Jim to make what already is a fine example of a court an even a better court.
I think in that regard, I think it would be fair to say that the administration of our court has historically received, frankly, a lot of national attention for a number of things. For example, our court was one of the very first ones to understand that we really needed things like case management plans, that somebody other than just the individual judge really needed to be looking at how long it took a case to get from start to finish, from the day it was filed until the day it was concluded, whether it was civil or criminal. And so systems under, for example, Judge Marr, and after that Judge John Kessler, and Judge Langer, Judge Froelich, Judge Gorman, all Mike's predecessors as administrative judge did so much to implement those things that make our court as efficient as possible. And then along came a real step in the right direction, which was e-filing, so that we avoid a lot of paperwork. We do things online and as much as we possibly can, and that's been implemented now both on the civil side of the house as well as criminal. Got a couple of minutes to go. Judge Singer, any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
You know, just that we'd like our viewers to know that we are working to address specifically and including services for women who are in trouble in our community, and in respect of that, we are working very hard with the county commissioners again, who recognize the problem and have each assured us that they're well aware of the fact that we've had some services for men when they were our primary criminal offenders by percentage that we don't have for women who have, because of the drug epidemics, have grown percentage-wise very dramatically. And so we're working on that, and we're working on a situation where we can provide those women, and again, many of whom are human trafficking victims, we can provide them with a situation where they can feel safe and free from their trafficker, and we look very much forward to that, and in collaboration with the YWCA, which has been very helpful with that. We're working to help out our women.
Okay. I think that brings us, if not to the end, awfully close to the end of our show for this evening, and I want to remind folks that this has been a production of You and the Law, which is a monthly public service program that's sponsored by the Dayton Bar, and it's designed to bring Montgomery County, Ohio citizens news of the legal world around them. One of the things that I wanted to echo before we wrap up this evening is that we have, I believe, in our new court administrator, Jim Dare, one of the most remarkable people in public service that I've ever encountered. Professionally, it's really an honor to work with somebody who has the approach to his job that Jim has as our former head of adult probation. Just a fantastic guy, and then to work with my fellow judges, many of whom I knew only superficially before I took the bench, and now have come to know as people of tremendous substance and tremendous passion. Let me underscore a couple of other things. The executive producer of this series is Judge Michael Brigner. I wouldn't want him to feel that I'd left him out. The show was produced at the studios of the Dayton Access Television, and as always, we thank our volunteers here at the station who made tonight's program possible, and we thank tonight's guests, Montgomery County Common Pleas Court Judges Michael Tucker and Gregory F.Singer, great judges, good friends, and filling in for our convalescing program host, who's Mike Mata, and we hope you're doing better at home, Mike. I'm Montgomery County Common Pleas Court Judge Steve Dankof, and in the words of a personal hero of mine, good night and good luck.